Gathering wood was starting to become an issue in the world. It made up almost all of my time between projects. So I decided it was time to do something about it. In order to make this farm, however, I would first need a few other farms. So I got started on this world's biggest project yet, a slime farm. But first, how about a quick recap of the previous video? I built up a small fishing village. I built an easy early game spider farm for easy early game experience. I built a raid farm for totems. Although the farm didn't quite work right, it was still a decent way to get totems and emeralds. I built a blacksmith building with a stone generator and super smelter. Finally, I finished by building an incredibly overpowered guardian farm. Obviously, a lot more happened, however, you'll have to go back and watch that video if you haven't already. With all that out of the way, let's jump back into the world. I used MiniHUD to find slime chunks in my world. I don't know the seed of the world, so I figured this would be the easiest option. I could have looked for one underground, but it would have taken way too much time. I got started digging out a border around a double slime chunk that was on my starter island.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave.
I dug out the first few layers manually. This was really slow though, so I switched to using a TNT duping machine. Now you might be thinking, don't they usually require slime? And you would be right. However, I found a newer, simpler design that doesn't require slime. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. I've been learning how to use Litematica more effectively recently, so I'll probably start using it more often in the future to make builds like this much easier.
Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
It was day 120 when I finally got started building the platforms. I placed pumpkins on the ground as a light source to keep other mobs from spawning. I continued building platforms for the next few days, finally ending on day 124. Next, I worked on the collection system. I used water to force the slimes into one direction, placing magma blocks at the end with a minecart collection system beneath it to collect the slime balls. Days 127 and 128, I cleaned up and finished the project. I added the iron golems that the slimes would attempt to attack, but would instead end up falling to the collection system. By the way, this farm was designed by Waddles. I adapted a few things to make it work in 1.19, but overall the farm didn't require many changes. I let the slime farm run in the background as I got started on the next farm. This one would require quite a few bees' nests, so I explored the nearby forest and silk touched as many as I could gather. As you could probably guess, the next farm would be a honey farm. I decided to use flowering azaleas instead of flowers, as I thought it would look a bit nicer. I gathered some redstone components, as well as some dark oak, spruce, and deep slate. I finished gathering materials and got started on the honey farm. I started with the redstone side of things, so the farm would run as I built the rest of it. I didn't want the farm to be ugly, so I designed a nice looking build in Creative and used Litematica to help me build it easier. Overall, I think this build turned out great. I made sure the farm was connected to the rest of the world by adding a path to it. I also built a smaller area to the side where I could fill more nests with bees and gather honeycomb. I also built a small fence in front of the build. I would come in later and add honey blocks. I messed up when picking up this hive again, this time angering an entire family. I'm pretty sure they all died to a lost stinger or from the campfire. With the honey farm done, I decided it was time to start on the third part of our tree farm tech tree. I haven't explained this yet, so I think this would probably be a good time to do so. See, I found this really cool and advanced looking tree farm on YouTube. I believe the original design is by ilmango. However, I would need a ton of slime blocks and honey blocks, hence the previous two farms. The last major component was iron. I had a few stacks, which likely would have allowed me to build the farm. However, I spend a lot of time mining for iron in these videos, so to save myself a lot of time in the future, I decided to make an iron farm. Now that you're caught up, let's get back into the building. I found a good spot within the spawn chunks. Building the farm in the spawn chunks would make sure that the farm was always working, even if I was away from home. I figured out how much space I would need for the farm, and got started flattening out an area. I bone mealed moss to make the area where the golems would spawn look nice without having to place a bunch of blocks. After that, I built the farm itself. This farm is a super simple design by Mushoden, so I'll leave a link to their channel below. Go check them out. Next, I got started on gathering villagers. I would need 6 in total. Villagers are always hard to work with, as they tend to just do whatever they want. I coaxed a few of them over with the promise of free jobs and a place to sleep. I cleared the temporary blocks and found a zombie to place in the middle. The farm immediately started working. I wanted to decorate the farm a bit better, so I used a mixture of stone bricks, mossy stone bricks, and moss to give the farm the appearance of an old abandoned ruins. I found a cat wandering around the iron farm, and decided to tame it. Say hello to Xanthi, guardian of the ruins. Day 143 was mostly just a day of chores. I checked the various farms to make sure they were working properly, and got started preparing an area for the tree farm. There was one more farm that I wanted to make before getting started on the tree farm. In order to run the tree farm long term, I would need a bone meal farm, so I got started building one. Unfortunately, this first design really wasn't working as well as it should have, so I tore it down and found a different design and got started building on that one. While I'm working on that, I'd like to take a second to ask you to like the video and subscribe. It seriously helps the channel grow and lets me know that you're enjoying the content. I'm also working on getting channel memberships, which will likely be available by the time you're watching this. You'll get access to all future videos early, emotes and badges, and a shout out at the end of every video. Thanks for all the support, and now back to the video. I finished the new bone meal farm, and it was working really well, so I let it run in the background for a while I worked on decorating it. I went with dirt for the roof, but I would come back later and replace it with moss. Finally though, I was ready to start on the tree farm. I gathered sand, clay for terracotta, converted a bunch of wood into fences. I gathered a ton of redstone for various redstone components. I made some honey blocks and slime blocks, and crafted a stack of pistons and turned them into sticky pistons. I finished crafting the various redstone components needed for the farm. I needed one more thing though. Something that was pretty rare and I hadn't seen yet. coral fans. Coral fans are needed for the TNT blast chamber, but unfortunately they're only found in the coral reefs. So I set out and eventually found one. I put all my components in a chest boat and got started building the farm. I got pretty far into the build, but one part just would not work. The big arms on either side that are used to clear out the leaves just would not work. They require you to place pistons and redstone blocks in the right order so that they don't fire early, but I just could not get it to work. Anytime that they would run, the entire machine would break. I rebuilt them many times, and eventually gave up. At this point, I was so far into the build, and I had gathered up a ton of materials, but it just wouldn't work. So I took a break for a while. I came back a few days later with a new plan. I decided to go with a completely different tree farm design, one that was much simpler but still just as effective. Sure, I had gathered all these materials for this farm, but I'm sure I could find a good use for them later.
Always give it 100, don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing, I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe it.
With the new tree farm design done and working, I gave it a quick test. And it worked flawlessly. I wanted the area to look nice, since it was so close to my base. So I built a trunk around the farm itself, making it look like maybe at one point a giant spruce tree was growing there, but was destroyed during a mysterious event, or something like that. I used 2x2 spruce trees to build up the outer trunk to save me some time. While working on that, I got my first trident. I underestimated the size of the TNT explosion, as it kept blowing a hole in the side of the build. I enchanted my newly acquired trident. I kinda regret going without Riptide, but I might change that later. I finished cleaning up the trunk around the tree farm. I don't really know what to call it, so if you have any suggestions, leave a comment down below. I really wasn't sure what to do next, so while I was coming up with some ideas, I built a small house next to the storage building. It serves no purpose, but it does help to bring some life to the island. I tore down the pumpkin farm. I don't think I showed this farm, but I basically just built it for the spawning layers of the slime farm. I built a sort of park area between the house I just built and the smokehouse. I made these street lamps with sea lanterns. I didn't really like the design though, so I changed them later. Next, I wanted to build a farm that I usually build way earlier, but I just kind of forgot about it this time. A wool farm. I crafted a bunch of dispensers and observers and smelted some glass. I chose a spot for it close to the honey farm. I forgot I needed double the amount of observer for this version of the farm, so I went to the nether and found some more quartz. I finished the farm and gathered up a bunch of sheep. I didn't have all the dyes yet, so I left them undyed for now. I checked on the iron farm and it was completely full, so I crafted as much iron into iron blocks as I could, and taking some of the iron and making shears to finish up the wool farm. I went pretty simple with the build around the wool farm, making a sort of lean-to, leaving access at the back so I could replace the shears. I collected every dye that I had access to currently. I still hadn't found a desert, so I wasn't able to make green, lime, or cyan dye yet. I figured, since I still had time left in the video, that I would set out to try to find a desert. As I mentioned in the previous video, I don't know the seat of the world, so I would have to go out and explore and hope I stumble across one. I explored for a while, but no luck this time around. I cut my losses and dyed the sheep with the dyes that I could make. Now that I had a wool farm, I thought it would be a fun idea to make a ship docked at the northern port. I'm not very good at making ships, but I thought I'd give it a shot. It ended up being a bit small, but overall I do like the design. I didn't have enough wool to finish the build, so I would finish that up later. I went to the Nether to gather some warped wood for my next build. This is easily my favorite build in the world so far. I think it ties into the theme of the world really well, creating an era of mystery and adventure without being too over the top. I found a wandering trader with a green dye trade, and was finally able to dye my sheep the colors of the rainbow. I came up with a banner design to represent the village. I redid the streetlights, incorporating the new banner and repeated them going down the main street that leads from the port to the Birch Bridge. I realized I never actually finished the first farm I built in this episode. I was going to use lime green glass to cover the whole of the slime farm, but I didn't actually have any yet. I got enough green dye from that wandering trader to finish a small section, but I would need way more to finish. So I set off once again in search of a desert. I sailed west for the better part of a day, and finally came across a mesa. This was promising as deserts can usually be found near mesas. I wandered for a while, finally finding some cactus. I found an outpost that generated in the side of a dune. It was pretty cool looking. I also found a desert temple, though the loot wasn't that good. I returned home and used a name tag on Xanthe. I built a cactus farm. For the build around it, I wanted to experiment a bit with the build style I've been using. I went with the usual style I've been using, however I added something on top, a fish skeleton, and I absolutely love this. Mixing the more serious tone of the village with a cartoony topper just looked so cool to me. One more thing that I wanted to do in this episode was to make an overpowered bow. Can you believe that I've survived almost 200 days without one? It definitely helped make things a bit more challenging for me. I finished the glass platform over the slime farm, and got rid of the chest that I filled up with stone while digging out the hole. I wanted to make this area a sort of museum of important milestones of this world, so I placed down 2 diamond blocks, each representing 100 days survived in the world. Who knows, maybe we'll get enough to make a full diamond beacon. I walked around for a while, admiring the new builds in the world. It was really starting to feel like home. Day 200 finally rolled around. It was rainy, so I didn't actually notice for a while. This video has been all about infrastructure so far, building farms so that I have the resources and time to make more and bigger farms and builds in the future. It's been another fun 100 days, and I hope that the next 100 days are even more fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.